Greetings, my wonderful students. Today we discuss conflicts over land as the country began to expand west. As the nation expanded, many Native Americans remained in the east. The Cherokee, Creek, Seminole, Chickasaw, and Choctaw peoples had created their own farming communities in the south, and Americans called them the Five Civilized Tribes. Now, many settlers wanted Native American lands, and they wanted the federal government to relocate the Native Americans west of the Mississippi. President Jackson supported the white settlers' demands and stated he wanted to move all of the Native Americans to the Great Plains. Jackson pushed the Indian Removal Act through Congress in 1830. This let the federal government pay the Native Americans to move west. In 1834, Congress created the Indian Territory, where Oklahoma is today. Many Native Americans felt forced to sell their land, and the Cherokee refused to do so. In the treaties of the 1790s, the federal government had recognized the Cherokee as a separate nation, but the state of Georgia refused to accept that. In 1830, Georgia made the Cherokee land part of the state, and tried to enforce Georgia state laws on the Cherokee Nation. The Cherokee took the state to the Supreme Court, and in Worcester versus Georgia, the court ruled that Georgia had no right to interfere with the Cherokee. Jackson declared he would ignore the court's decision, and no one challenged him on it. President Jackson is quoted as saying, the court has made its decision, now let them enforce it." The Trail of Tears. In 1835, the Cherokee were divided about what to do. 500 Cherokee signed the Treaty of New Echota, which stated that the Cherokee would give up all of their land by 1838. Cherokee Chief John Ross sent a letter to the Senate saying that those 500 Cherokee, did not represent all 17,000 Cherokee. Even some senators, like Daniel Webster and Henry Clay, opposed the treaty as unfair. But this did not change the mind of other senators, and in 1836, the Senate approved the treaty by one vote. By 1838, only 2,000 Cherokee had moved to the west, so President Martin Van Buren ordered the army to move the rest of them. They rounded up the Cherokee in North Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, and Tennessee, and began to march them west to the Indian Territory. Many were not prepared for the journey and died from hunger, disease, and exposure. By the time the journey was done, almost 1/4 of the Cherokee population had died, and historians call this trip the Trail of Tears. The Seminoles were the only Native Americans to successfully resist removal. They were led by Osceola, who was born a Creek, but he became leader of the Seminoles. In the Seminole Wars, in 1835, the U.S. Army arrived in Florida to force the removal of the Seminoles. In December, the Seminole forces attacked U.S. forces, led by Major Francis Dade, and killed most of them. Because of the Dade Massacre, more troops were sent. Escaped slaves from South Carolina and Georgia joined the Seminoles. Between 1835 and 1842, 3,000 Seminoles and African Americans, who were called Black Seminoles, fought 30,000 U.S. troops. They would make surprise attacks on settlements and then disappear into the Florida swamps. Many Seminoles were captured or killed, and the fighting stopped in 1842. The war broke out again in 1855, and by 1858, what was left of the Seminole escaped into the Everglades, where their descendants still live today. Most of the Native Americans now lived west of the Mississippi. They had given up over 100 million acres of land and had received 32 million acres in the west and $68 million. They lived on reservations organized by nation. The 5 civilized tribes lived in the eastern half of the Indian Territory on lands already claimed by many Plains peoples. The U.S. built forts in the areas and promised to protect the 5 civilized tribes and maintain peace in the area. The Choctaw police force, known as the Light Horsemen, also helped maintain order and safety. The 5 tribes developed their own constitutions and governments, but disputes over removal would divide the groups for many years. And that's the end of this video.